Betterman is the most unique biopic I have ever seen, and I think this could be one of those movies that redefines what a biopic could be in the future. So let's talk about it. But before we get started, if you're new here, my name is Erin, and I talk all things movies and TV. So if you're into that sort of thing, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. That would be greatly appreciated on my end. But without further ado, let's talk about Betterman. So in this movie, we follow the story of the famous UK pop star known as Robbie Williams. And if you don't know who Robbie Williams is, don't worry, because I had no clue who he was either before I saw this movie. But anyways, we follow the rise and fall of his career. But the unique thing about this movie is that Robbie Williams portrays himself, but as a monkey, and it somehow actually works. Jumping right into the good, and the first thing I have here is of course the star of the show, Robbie Williams. Now, he plays himself in this movie, and I have to say, I have never seen a monkey with more charisma. And the fact that he is portrayed as a monkey in this movie is one of the reasons why I think this movie sets itself apart from just being your typical biopic. Robbie Williams himself loved this idea of portraying himself as a monkey in this movie while they were making this film, and he even said himself, "I'm like a performing monkey." And that's really how he sees himself as well, as this dancing monkey that's only meant to entertain. And when you watch this movie through that lens, it really works in my opinion. I mean, he quite literally is just a dancing, performing monkey only meant to entertain and has no real fulfillment outside of that. Since I've seen this film, I have been thinking, would this have worked just as well if Robbie was portrayed as a human? And honestly, I don't think it would have, because we would have had to explain those elements of his character instead of his character being a visual representation of what Robbie feels like, which is a dancing monkey. This film also does a good job at exploring the dark side of fame, and the last like 45 minutes of this actually gets pretty emotionally heavy as we're watching Robbie kind of deal and fight with his demons that he's been dealing with for the entire film. Anyways, I thought Robbie Williams did a great job playing himself, which probably wasn't all that hard to do, honestly, and the decision to make himself a monkey in this is why I think this film works so well, in my opinion. Next up for the good is the music. Now, as I said before, I had no clue who Robbie Williams was going into this film, so I definitely hadn't heard any of his music, but after watching this movie, I can definitely now say that I know exactly who Robbie Williams is, and I can see why he was one of the biggest pop stars in the UK. Now, I'm not gonna lie, he has some really good songs, and I would say Rock DJ is probably my favorite, but Angels is up there as well. But the cool part about his music, at least I think, is that it kind of tells the story of his life, and you know what Robbie was feeling and going through when he wrote that song. On top of that, when it came to the bigger musical numbers in this film, which I thought were awesome, the choreography was really good there as well. And you could tell that the director of The Greatest Showman, Michael Gracie, had his hands all over this one, because there was a couple things that they did in those musical numbers that 100% reminded me of certain moments in The Greatest Showman. The music was one of the best parts in this entire movie, and I think it's safe to say, yeah, I'm kind of a fan of Robbie Williams now. And finally, for the good, I have the cinematography, and I have to admit, this is something I didn't expect to be as good as it was in this movie, but I have to say that they got pretty creative with some of these shots and transitions that they used in this film. This usually happened during the musical numbers. There was just lots of creative shots and visuals that helped us see what Robbie was feeling in that moment. And I don't want to really spoil any of those moments, but during a lot of these songs, they would transition us into this really cool visual that kind of depicted what was going on in Robbie's mind. And because of all these creative shots and visuals, it gave this movie a sense of style and character, which I appreciated. Moving on to the so-so, and the only thing I have here is that at times it did feel like the pacing was just a little bit off, in my opinion. Now, I'm probably just being a little bit nitpicky, because at the end of the day, it wasn't anything terrible. The first half of this movie was really fast-paced as we followed the rise of Robbie Williams, and with that fast pace, when we got to those more serious and emotional moments in the first half of this thing, they really didn't stay or sit with those moments as long as they could or should have, in my opinion, and those moments kind of just got lost in the chaos of everything that was going on in the first half of this film. But you know, the more I think about that, the more I think that maybe that was the point of the fast-paced nature in the first half of this movie, because at that time in Robbie's life, things were going super fast. He was on the rise and didn't really have the time time to focus on those more emotional and serious moments of his life. But anyways, this does slow down quite a bit in the second half as we deal with the fall of Robbie, and we spend a little bit more time with those emotional moments that actually hit pretty hard in my opinion. And finally, getting into the bad, and the only thing I have here is that even though I have been praising this movie about its uniqueness, in terms of story beats, it does kind of hit those same story beats that your typical biopic hits. We see the fast rise of Robbie Williams, and then we see him at the top for a little bit, but then we see his ultimate downfall. And then of course, while he is at the bottom, he finally decides to make a change and work through his problems to come out on the other side, well, a better man. And I promise, no pun intended there. So yes, I guess you can say that you've seen this story before, but I would say you haven't seen this story told like this. So even though this movie does hit those same biopic beats, the way they tell the story and hit those beats is so creative and innovative that you don't feel like you're watching your same old formulaic biopic. So at the end of the day, this is a really good movie. It's led by a great performance by Robbie Williams himself and has some fun musical numbers while also showing the dark side of fame. And it tells its story in such a unique way that it adds a breath of fresh air to the biopic genre. So yes, this is a movie that I would 100% recommend you go see. Those are my thoughts on Betterman. Be sure to let me know what you thought of the movie down in the comments. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, get your Eazy Apparel at shopeasyapparel.com. God bless, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.